Jason Roberts, are you there? Oh,
Hello?
Hello? Hey, Jason, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. You're live on This Week in Startups.
Okay, great.
And you sent me an email, I think, yesterday.
Yes.
And I asked you, like, hey, that's some interesting questions. Why don't you ask me on the air? So why don't you tell me where you're at with your startup and then what your question is?
Okay, so we started a little web startup to build I guess you say, a web-based version of PowerPoint. This is probably back in 2005. So at that time, there really wasn't much else around except for like Gmail, Google Maps. So, my thinking was, hey, this is going to be awesome. Nobody's doing anything like this. Unfortunately, it took about 2 years to build, and by the time we had released it, Google had already released their equivalent version into the Google Docs suite. So that was a problem. We came out a little too late, and Google was offering a comparable product for free. And also at that time, it took us so long that we pretty much burned through the capital. So then, what do? You're out of money, and Google has a comparable product that's free. So now it's been running for about a year. I haven't really spent a whole lot of time on it because I've had to earn income, doing consulting and other things. And it's just sort of been picking up users. There's around 23,000 users with about 35 new people sign up per day.
And so the question is?
The question is, what do I do? I mean,
yeah.
Can you do anything with a company like this? Do I shut it down? Do I try and start, charging people? How do I charge people without pissing people off? I don't really know what the best approach is.
Well, first off, you learned a lot of lessons, and that's a great thing. So when you're doing a startup company, and this is your first company or second?
This is about my second, I would say, startup software company.
So the first lesson you learned was something we talked about on the first episode with Brian Alvey, who was here from CrowdFusion, which is release early, release often, don't worry, be crappy. You held the thing for 2 years, and then when you finally released it, Google had released theirs, so they took your Steam. And they also took your user base, correct? That's
right. And the other thing is that when you spend that much time on it, especially when you're in a small company, you just kind of put all your eggs in one basket. If we had released something in a few months, if it didn't work out, we could have had time to iterate or change ideas.
So, great thing you learned here is you learned an incredible lesson. You'll never do that again. You want to get the product out there. You want to iterate. You want to learn from your audience. The second thing is Google drank your milkshake. And guess what?
Right.
That's going to happen in life. So that's another lesson. You don't want to jump in front of the Google or Microsoft train because they can roll over you. So I guess the question now is, it's got 20,000 users who seem to like it. What is it that they like about the product that they don't like about Google's offering?
I never really asked that kind of a question. I mean, I have people call me up and they thank me for it, and I think there's a lot of students and people like that who seem to like it. I don't even know why they haven't found or are using Google. I think they might have just stumbled across Prezo and they thought, hey, this works, so they like it, I guess.
So sometimes in life you have to cut your losses. You're not going to have the wherewithal to compete with Google.
Right.
They've made this into a commodity business. Probably the best thing for you to do is to focus on another project. So then the question is, what do you do with this asset? And the best thing to do with this asset is probably open source it, give it to the community, and maybe email your members and say, listen, there are other offerings out here. You guys like this one. We're going to have an open source platform. Give it to maybe your lead developer. Keep 20% ownership in it, and move on with your life because you learned a couple of great lessons and you got in front of the Google train. And every month you spend on this is a month you could be doing something else.
That was kind of my thinking. And one other lesson I'd like to point out that I think I learned is when I first started working on this, the thought was, hey, this is where the world's going. All these big apps are going to go to the web. Let us get out there early. Let's do something that's complicated, and we'll flip it to Google or Yahoo or Salesforce.com or something. Problem is, it's a risky bet. You don't know what's going to happen, and I would say to people, don't do that. Start smaller and maybe not try and flip it.
Listen, you tried, and even with the flipping concept, every business has an exit. That's the reason people invest. You had investors. It's the nature of the beast.
Right.
You could have released more often, but it may not have changed the inevitability of Google drinking your milkshake.
Right.
And you learned a couple lessons, and now you move on and you go on to the next thing. You take the lessons you learned from this, you put it into the next ones. And a great outcome would be to give it to the community. There might be an open source product out there that could benefit from it. You keep some equity in the open source product or whatever, and you call it a day. And it's like taking an MBA class. You'll never forget these lessons.
Yeah, I could probably write down a whole list of them that I would never repeat. Can I ask you one question about
Sure.
that though? When we talk about releasing it to the retaining ownership in some kind of open source product, I mean,
Yeah.
how does that work? What do you even mean by that?
Yeah, so you know, there's open source software out there like the Mozilla Foundation, and if you go to SourceForge, you can see all the open source products. What you could do is you could maintain ownership of the domain name.
Right.
What's the name of the product again?
It's called Preezo.
Yeah, Preezo.
Preezo.com.
So you could own Preezo.com with your developer. You have a lead developer on this who's passionate about it?
I am the developer.
Oh, you are the developer. So
Right.
even more reason to get this off this monkey off your back. You basically say to the open source community, here it is. You can own the domain name. You can own the hosted version of it. The software itself is open source to anybody. They can see the code. They can change it. And maybe you retain ownership of the hosted version in that domain name. And you charge people. And you just immediately take the 20,000 people who are using it and say, I can only keep doing this if you pay $10 a year. And boom, see how many of them do it. If none of them do it, you've actually learned how valuable it is to them.
Right. Do you think it's better to send an email and ask people to get a sense of it, or just go ahead and invest the time to set up a merchant account and payment mechanism and just do it and then see?
Well,
what
the good news is you have PayPal. So the way you could phrase this is you could start your PayPal account and say, listen, I'm moving on to other projects. I know you guys love the product. Can I ask that we do a fundraising drive for the next 6 months? If I can get this amount of money in the fundraising drive, $10,000, we'll keep it going. If not, I'm going to probably have to shut it down. Don't worry, I'm not going to pull the rug out from under you guys, but I do need to pay for these things. I've got a wife, kids, whatever, a life, time, etc. And if they don't respond nicely to that, you could say just, hey, I'm asking for $10 to $100 per person.
Right.
And, I think $50 is what it's worth. So, let's see if we can get 200 people to do it. If you can't get 200 people to do it and pay for your product, it's probably not the greatest offering in the world, and/or you have somebody who's drunk your milkshake, which is the case in this case.
Right.
So.
Okay, well, that sounds like great advice. That's pretty much what I was thinking it might be your answer, and I appreciate it.
Here's the good news. You're working on another company, I take it, right?
Yeah, I have a couple ideas, things that I'm kind of piecing together. And that's
excellent. So if you can get that idea together by June 30th in the form of 3 slides, you can submit it to TechCrunch 50, and you know me, and you've got my email address, and you've got the inside line to being one of the 50 companies that launch on September 14th and 15th in San Francisco at TechCrunch 50. Yes, that's a plug.
Great. That sounds like a great opportunity. I'll definitely see if I can get something put together.
Awesome.
Well, thanks so much.
Keep fighting, and getting knocked down, it's not a big deal, right? Some of the best fighters got knocked down a lot, and Michael Jordan missed more shots than anybody. He also scored more points than anybody. It's the nature of the beast. You swing the bat, sometimes you get hit with the ball, sometimes you strike out, sometimes you hit a home run. Just keep swinging.
Right. Okay, great.
Awesome.
All right, thanks so much, Jason.
My pleasure.
You've been watching This Week in Startups. To watch the full episode, click here. To check out some other shows from This Week In, click here.